What's up, guys? So today we're going to be comparing the Galaxy A34 to the Galaxy S23 FE. This is a pretty interesting comparison because the A34 is actually way better than you would expect for the price point of $250 right now. You can find it on Amazon. That link will be down below. The S23 FE is going for around $630. Depending on where you get it, you can get it on Amazon for a little bit cheaper as well with a gift card. So I'll have that down below. But yeah, so very interesting comparison. I think this comes down to the camera quality actually, because as we're going to see, the A34 for the average person is still going to be pretty good performance wise. But let's go ahead and dive in here. All right, so both phones actually pretty much look alike. But the big difference here is that the A34 is an all plastic phone. So it does feel a little bit cheaper than the S23 with its, glass and metal design. It is also on the A34. It is an IP67 dust and water resistant. You do have the IP68 on the S23 FE. Besides that, they pretty much look identical in terms of size and just the overall look. So that's why I was saying the A34, it looks like a premium device, but if you actually hold like a glass and metal phone, you will actually feel that difference. And there's a bit of a weight difference as well too, with the S23 FE obviously being a little bit heavier. But besides that, they pretty much look identical in terms of the overall design. All right, so let's talk about the displays on both of these phones. So the A34 has a 6.6 inch display. It's 1080p, 390 for the PPI. It's Super AMOLED, 120 Hertz. It gets up to 1000 nits brightness. The S23 FE has the dynamic AMOLED display. It's 120 Hertz HDR10 Plus with 1450 nits peak brightness. It's 6.4 inches and it's 1080p 403 for the PPI. So you actually have a bigger display on the A34, as you guys can see. It's probably not that noticeable, but in person it is, definitely a little bit bigger. You can notice it. You will see the punch hole versus the sort of older water drop notch here. Honestly, looking at both screens like head on, they pretty much look identical in terms of color. And let's see, yeah, they pretty much look the same. So the Super AMOLED versus the dynamic AMOLED, it's not, there's no actual real difference besides like the punch hole. Now this is where Samsung dropped the ball. They gave the S23 FE the same chunky bezels as a $250 phone, which I think is just straight up bizarre. It has literally the same chin down here and the same bezels right here. It's absolutely insane that they did that. It just makes the phone definitely look a lot cheaper than it should. Your $600 phone shouldn't have the same screen to body ratio as a $250 phone here. So they definitely dropped the ball. I don't know what they were thinking with doing that. But as far as the screen, the A34 actually has a very good screen if you don't mind the sort of older notch design. But as far as they have the same thickness and bezels, and honestly color wise and overall just the feel of both screens being 120 Hertz, they pretty much feel the same as well. Alright, so I have the Geekbench scores pulled up here. So let's talk about the actual specs here. Alright, so the A34, it does have the Dimensity 1080 chip on here. You also have micro SD card support, which the S23 FE does not have. And then you also have on here, on the base model, 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. The S23 FE has the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 processor, no SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 8 gigs of RAM on the base model. You can see from these Geekbench scores, you can see the big difference and what it compares to processor wise. So you'll be surprised, the A34 is actually not as as slow as a phone as you might think looking at the Geekbench score comparisons. Now if we get into like a little speed test, you'll see that the A34 still is able to do a pretty good job at just opening applications and remaining smooth when you're bouncing in and out, just doing normal stuff on your phone. It's really not laggy at all. It's pretty fast, and you can see even in comparison to the 8 Gen 1, it's still a pretty fast phone. Pretty smooth scrolling on both, so they feel really similar. when it comes to bouncing in and out of applications here. Get into Subway Surfer. Now, like I said, if you're into gaming, the Agent 1 will do a much better job, as we're going to see if we get into PUBG. But as you can see, with just casual games like this, you're bouncing in applications, doing social media. The A34 is actually more than enough for the average person. So we go ahead and get into PUBG here. Now we're in PUBG, and on the A34 here, it does a pretty good job, like I said, for the casual gamer here to play a couple matches of PUBG or Call of Duty. It'll do a pretty good job. You can see we're able to do smooth extreme, but you will get overall just better performance on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 here. And I think our max settings for PUBG here is, see here, our max settings HDR Ultra, so we're not able to do HDR Extreme or HDR 60 frames. So again, if you're like a competitive gamer or something like that, definitely you'll appreciate having that extra power. You have HDR at Extreme, so you get the 60 frames, and this should eventually get updated for 90 frames. But overall, if you're more of a hardcore gamer, you'll be able to play games at a much better frame rate. But like I said, if you're not like really into games and you only just play for fun or a couple matches, the A34 is actually more than enough. Both of these phones have stereo speakers, so let's go ahead and hear if we can spot a difference. We'll start with the S23. Yeah, the S23 FE has a slight advantage, but it's actually not as big as I thought it would be. The A34 actually has some pretty good speakers, a pretty good bass on both of them. Like I said, it's actually way closer, but the S23 is slightly louder. Alright, so one thing that unfortunately they didn't add with the S23 FE is the ultrasonic fingerprint scanner. So it pretty much has the same fingerprint scanner as the A34. The optical one, and it pretty much feels the same, so there's no real difference there. You also have face unlock that you can take advantage of as well too. I think this is where it kind of comes down to, is the image quality. We should see a bigger gap in terms of image quality here. So let's go ahead and talk about the actual specs here. So on the S23 FE, we do have a 50 megapixel standard, an 8 megapixel telephoto, has 3 times optical zoom, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It shoots in 8K 24 and has a 10 megapixel selfie cam that also shoots in 4K 60. The A34 has a 48 megapixel standard camera, 8 megapixel ultra wide, a 5 megapixel macro. So there is no dedicated telephoto lens on the A34. So you also have 4K 30 video on here, and you also have a 13 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 30. Alright, so check out these side-by-side stills. Let me know what you guys think. All right, so let's talk about battery life. I was expecting to get significantly better battery life on the A34 here, but that wasn't the case here. The S23 FE, both of these phones actually have extremely good battery life and really, really good standby time. So you do have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery on the A34. It's 25 watt charging. There is no wireless charging, of course. And then you also have a 4,500 milliamp hour battery on the S23 FE. You have the 25 watt wired charging and wireless charging. Like I said, the battery life is really good on both of these phones. I was expecting this one to have better battery life, but that wasn't the case since it does have, you know, a bigger battery, but that actually wasn't the case here. The S23 FE, it could be because the chip is more efficient or something like that, but yeah, the battery life, regardless of which phone you get, is going to be really good on both of these actually. So yeah, so that is pretty much it, guys. Be sure to let me know what you guys think. Would you just save the money and go with the A34, or would you spend the extra money and go with the S23 FE?